Hey guys, Matt the camera guy here.
Matt the camera guy.
Matt the camera guy.
I'm Matt the camera guy, and this is my story.
So I started BMX bike racing when I was 10 years old. I think I raced 3 or 4 years. I was a state champion in South Carolina. As you can see there, my number is made out of emergency tape, and there's a story behind that, but we won't cover that today. So I was a state champion, and from BMX bike racing, it kind of led into discovering, sports, and I was a baseball player. I did pretty much the bare minimum to get through high school and to play baseball. But baseball taught me, how to dedicate yourself to something. I mean, we were practicing, lifting weights, or playing baseball. I mean, that's what I did from the time I was in 7th grade to the time my freshman year in college when I got hurt. I really learned the work ethic of doing what it takes to perform at an early age. I equate back to BMX bicycles and practicing, and just when I got hurt playing baseball, that was a time in my life to where I was a young adult. I was 19 years old. I had the world by the tail. I was going to college, and I had my mother and father paying my way like many of us do because they want your life to be better than theirs. And I took that time, and I'm a man enough to say, for granted. I did the party thing. I was in a fraternity. Again, I went from making good grades in college playing baseball to doing just whatever it took just to get my parents to pay the bills. That was a time to where I look back, and when I started really learning myself, because I didn't have something to fall back on. You don't realize at that time, but that's what your parents are trying to do, is prepare you so life won't be that hard. I always knew that I had a passion for racing. And once I got hurt and flunked out of college, my dad came to me and said, well, Matt, I tried to help you and give you the world. I told you had one shot, and he meant it. He said, if you want to go back to school and better yourself and, do whatever it is you want to do in life, you'll do it on your own. I learned that day that life does not owe you a thing. It will beat you up. It will tear you down. My dad did finally talk me into, my dad was a banker, and he finally talked me in. He said, just come to the bank. You can make some money and put you some money back and figure out what you want to do. So that's what I did. I was in banking probably for about 3 months, and I realized that it sucked. It wasn't for me. I wanted to go racing. Greenville Tech at this time, I started looking into going back to school and taking some engineering courses. In my generation, engineering started really becoming big on race teams. Like, race teams wanted engineers now. They didn't want crew chiefs. They wanted that with an engineering background. I knew that I would have to educate myself on some level to get in the door, and that's what I did. I took night classes at Greenville Tech while I was working at the bank during the day. From there, my street rod teacher, hired me for his shop. And at the time, hell, I'm a newbie. I'm still green behind the ears, and I didn't realize I was going to work for a really high-end street rod shop. That shop was Street Metal Fabrication. Don Jacks, he was a great mentor of mine. Don taught me how to do metal work, and how to weld, and how to fabricate. Basically learn that to build high-end cars, it takes a lot of patience and a lot of money. We had a lot of success. We won a Good Guys show with that Harley truck we built. And that was a time when my father started seeing me thrive because I had come pretty much from the dud from baseball to I didn't do anything in college except party. And now I had left all that behind and I was focused. I'm on top of the world at this point, building cars, love what I'm doing, and I'm getting better. I remember I was welding a vintage air bracket in a dash, under a dash on a 50s pickup. When I came up out, I hit the side of my head and it gave me a concussion. They ended up calling my dad to come get me and take me to the doctor. While we were on the way, my dad told me, he's like, my depth perception's off. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He kept bumping curbs when he would turn. It's like he would turn too soon and he'd run up over the curb. And hell, I got a concussion at this point. I don't know. I think he's doing it kind of on purpose to kind of get back at me for some of the stuff I've done to him over the years. Unfortunately, that day changed the rest of my life. And my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer shortly after that and given 11 months to live. And during this time, my father asked me, he said, Matt, I want you to give banking one more shot because you don't have to be dirty and work for a living. You can be a banker and afford these things. And I told my father, I said, okay, I'll try it one more time. I said, but Dad, this is something I really love. I said, but I'll do it. The day he died, I went back to work a couple of days later and I told Don, I said, I promised my dad I'm going to give banking another shot. And I did. And, hindsight's always 20/20. I look back at that, and that is a time when I realized banking is not for me, and you don't have to, wear a coat and tie to be successful. And I think the transition too, my dad saw that as well. My father installed the business sense in me, and, my grandfather installed the mechanics in me. And of course, on my mom's side, they installed the willpower. I ended up going back in banking, and I lasted probably, 8 months maybe. And I remember I was sitting in my office, sitting here twiddling a pen just like this. And I go, this can be your life, or you can go do what you want to do. And that day at lunch, I went across the street and I got a job changing oil at a Goodyear. This is not a lie. Between that year span, I became an alignment tech. Goodyear sent me, I guess they recognized that I was serious, right off the bat. And they sent me to Hunter Alignment School in Roswell, Georgia. And that's where I've got, my background in front ends and suspensions. And so while I was at Goodyear, I ended up looking back at tech school and finding out that now they had a racing program, kind of like that street rod program I did. And it was about building chassis, race car setups, building shocks, anything doing with racing just in general. I ended up, while I was working at Goodyear, I'd go to school at night, got in that program and did really well in it. Again, my teacher in that program put me in the direction of a man by the name of Don Satterfield. And Don Satterfield Racing was one of the best learning experiences I've ever had. This man taught me how to race. I would hang gutters with Don all day long, and then we would work on the race car at night. We did that. We Pro Cup raced, and it was a lot. It was a lot of fun, and that's where I really got really hands-on because Don would let me do it. And that's what I let people know is the only way you're going to learn is to just do it. You're going to mess up. Yes, you are. You're going to screw up. Yes, you are. But it's like Rob Pitt says, when that ball slams you down, you take and you bounce back right back up higher than you ever have before. So that's the mentality that I got. I knew that racing was what I wanted to do, but my dad would say stuff like, well, your last name's not Earnhardt or Waltrip. And while I was working with Don Satterfield, I worked with some really great people. I met a guy by the name of Steve Alverson. For those of you that don't know Steve Alverson wears Velcro shoes and has perfect hair, and it would stay perfect in a windstorm or a hurricane, trust me. The first job that Steve and I ever had together is we hung a new Camaro body on a race car. We worked really well together. Of course, I'm still learning, and I'm just eating everything up Steve's showing me. And he worked for a big chassis company called Tech. He got me in there and started working part-time in there, testing with them and building race cars, doing sheet metal, and just kind of learning everything I could being around it. Go race, and Steve would crew chief that team, and I would go race on various other teams. Steve really taught me the ins and outs of a race car. We built them from the ground up out of tube and sheet metal, and I just got to see the raw turn into the finished product. Also, while I was there, a guy by the name of Greg Gary had a shock dyno. I would talk to him from time to time, and he says, you need to learn something that nobody else knows that makes you valuable, or either you need to be a talented fabricator to work in the big time. I took that to heart, and that's when I saw the opportunity from Greg to allow me access to his shock dyno, and I started building shocks for him, testing all the time. I'd work at night looking at different setups, and I would change shocks and look at them on the dyno. It was just, I had a lot of testing time. It's a different scenario at the racetrack. And from there, a girl from Texas was racing some kind of super truck series out there, and she was the hot shoe out west. She came to Don Satterfield on a rental deal, car chief that car, and built shocks then. I think we had another 2 years at Don Satterfield before they wanted to break off and hire they wanted their own team. Her dad wanted to be a team owner. Long story short, they hired Steve as the crew chief and me as the car chief, and we housed that car out of Tech. I don't know, we ran UARA back then. We ran all kind of big kind of late model races, Myrtle Beach 400. I was sitting there working at Tech full-time now, and an Australian team came from out west, wanted to start running some K&N and some ARCA, late model stuff, just stuff that we were already doing. So I moved to Mooresville with the Australian team to car chief their stuff. That was a time that I look back and I really hated racing. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to do what it took to stay there. And by that, I realized once I was in Mooresville, it's no longer fun anymore. It's a job. You have to do what it takes to get to the next level. And I'll just leave it at that. But it's an ugly business, but it's a great business if you know what you're doing. My time in Mooresville, had it not been for my sister, I don't think I ever would have made it, because she lives up there, and family's important when you need them. She helped me through that time. She kept me fed, gave me a house to live in. Had it not been for her, I probably wouldn't have made it. That allowed me to, one, be up there, and then, that led into testing with some bigger teams, and then it opened up more doors, and then you start seeing how things are in the big time. And once I got there, I didn't want to be there. I knew that grassroots racing was where I wanted to be, because it still had a fun factor to it. I'm not saying we didn't have good times in the big times, but it's a little different. The pressure's different. It's just a different deal. I'm thankful that I got the experience. It taught me a lot. After that, racing, I kind of took a break from racing. When you're gone all the time and you don't know where you are when you wake up in a hotel sometimes, that's scary. And I never understood it until it happened. Being on the road that much, you don't know where home is anymore. I needed a break, so I took one. I ended up getting me a job at GE. I worked on turbines here in the upstate. I don't know, I was there probably, a year. I will tell you, racing is a drug. And it's a drug that will keep pulling you back in and pulling you back in because, again, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, all in a matter of seconds. There's nothing guaranteed. The racing gods have to be upon you when you run well, and everything has to go right. GE, I got rested up and I was ready to go. Along the way, I had a guy tell me too that, you will have one good driver in your career that has the talent to do it. And he says, you'll know it when you have it. But when you find it, he said, that's as good as it's going to get. He said, otherwise, you'll be 65 years old and still doing it. I still talk to him from time to time, and, he's one I'd like to keep private. But he helped me. He was a spotter for some big teams. He really helped me through the other times of racing life still goes on. You don't want to be like me and 65 years old and can't walk. You've realized that driver you had was 20 years ago. As I was working for GE, I got a phone call one day from the old crew chief wanting to get the band back together. Told me that this was a really good deal, that they had money backing it, and they wanted the kid to run another season of 4 cylinders, which I'm here to tell you that's a story in itself. Then move to late models, and then from there we want to start running straight rails and start moving him into the ARCA, K&N, Xfinity. I said, okay. I said, well, who's this kid? The kid's name was Kobe Howard, and he was a local guy out here in the upstate. His dad called me and told me what they were going to do and told me that, I would be the car chief and the spotter. Steve would be crew chief in the car. Kobe was 12 years old when I started with them. He was just a kid. So we raced that year, and Kobe did well. We didn't win any races, but we run up front. The experience of that really kind of refreshed my passion for racing again. Seeing this kid grow and watching him get molded into the young man that he is now. First year when we were 4-cylinder racing, we were testing Kobe in late models. Like, we'd go run his dad because he's a 3rd generation driver. We'd go test and his dad would race, but we'd have Kobe in the car making laps. And one day I remember we just said, hell, let's just run. Let's just let him run. Turns out the kid has really good car control, and the main thing is the kid's aware of what's around him. At that point, we started running full-time limited late models with him. His career was growing. I think we did that for another 4 years. We won a South Carolina Rookie of the Year. He moved on to straight rails and just did his natural progression. Now I'm happy to say the kid's made it. He's an Xfinity driver. If you don't believe me, look, Kobe Howard. Number 15. I knew that Kobe was my best talent I had ever worked with, and it really sunk in. Anybody that's raced can tell you when the writing's on the wall and the deal's getting towards the end. And it's racing. It's no hard feelings of how these racing deals end. They just end. When the money runs out, the deal runs out, and you've got to be smart enough to know when to make your next move. I knew that was my last move in full-time racing because I didn't want to be 65 years old and still hunting for it. I knew that was it. I was ready to start trying to move into my career as I would say now as an adult. I'm 42 years old. I didn't realize I was an adult till about 40. I started a little part-time business when I was not racing that last year. I had gotten into the drones. That was becoming really big during that time. It was like the 330 exempt would just stopped and the Part 107 had just started. It was a really cool time to be in the drone industry too. I'm really fortunate to have made my place in it during that time. It's like anything else. Your natural progression is, okay, well, all right, I've been in racing for 20 years. What do I do now if I'm not racing? Well, you take what you've learned and you apply it to anything you do. With a business, racing is the art of the hustle. And I think a small business owner is the same thing. You are constantly trying what's next. Real estate was that option for me because I had an in a real estate office to where, I had a couple of realtors after I finally kind of was half-ass photographer and videographer, and I'll show some of that footage here. You can see it's awful and I make fun of it and it gives me chills even seeing it now. You've got to start somewhere. I just want y'all to know that I started somewhere too, and this just didn't happen overnight. The drones led into the real estate. The real estate allowed me to become a videographer. My passion was not in real estate. My passion has always been in racing. So how can I merge these two? I went to Greer Dragway. A guy by the name of Mike Greer owns it. Mike Greer, I went to him and I told him, I said, look, I'm certified, I'm insured. I said, just let me shoot some drone footage. I'll do some ads for you. Let me learn, how to shoot this stuff. And he said, absolutely. And he let me in. Mike Greer is a big part of where I am today because he gave me a shot. That led to Rob Pitts calling me and saying, hey man, you're the guy I need. I remember it well. Rob and I met at Greenville Pickens Speedway. There was a car show there. So I guess that was my tryout. We did a moving scene shot with a drone. And he asked me, he says, you want the job? And I said, hell, why not? 2 weeks later, we're in Vegas at the SEMA show. I realized real quick that Rob had something special. Rob's a great guy, and I wanted to be a part of it. I'm happy to say that, it's turned into more than we ever expected, and it's still growing, and it looks like it's not showing any signs of slowing down. So Rob and I are full speed ahead on it. That led into the 3-pedal gasser series, doing some work for them. Then we moved on. We came up with an idea of Torqued Up TV, me and another guy. I had Speed Factor, he had Torqued Up TV, and we kind of merged them together, and I came up with a show called Octane Addicts. We are definitely looking at doing some things on Speed Factor and Torqued Up TV in the coming year. Now Boogie Tech and Boogie Tech Racing Products, and Chris's channel is taking off. That led into Phil Hartman Fabrication. Phil and I are going to do a lot more stuff this year. And then that moved into the SESO. I met some of the guys through Phil and Chris and Rob. And it's how it works. You just network and network and network, and you just keep networking. To me, I think that's what business is about. People do business with who they like. At the end of the day, we all have our journey on what it took to get here. And I think the thing that I want people to understand about me is that life is what you make it. That's the way I think. But I chose racing, and I think I was a pretty good one. It's led into all of this now, and I really hope that y'all have enjoyed learning who I am, and there's a whole lot more to learn, and that I'm always learning.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That's my story. Next week, we're diving right into camera gear and how I bring you the shots at the racetrack. I'm Matt the Camera Guy, and I'll see you next week.